Hello, everyone, and welcome to an episode of the Event Industry News podcast with Adam Parry, editor at Event Industry News. And joining me today is Oli Bailey, the interaction designer for IMEX, a very well-known international event, both in America and here and in Frankfurt, and also Panos, the CEO of Zenus AI, the leading company in the space when it comes to facial analysis and the use of facial recognition, etc., helping to power events from a number of different things that we'll get into, obviously, in this episode of the podcast, and talk about how IMEX are engaging with that technology and using it to the benefit of the attendance and the overall experience of the show. But Oli, I'd like to come to you first. Could you just give us a little bit of background about your role at IMEX and maybe how you got started in the industry and what that looks like for each event?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Adam. Hi, Panos. Wow, I've been at IMEX for a long time. In fact, it's coming up to year 20 for me. That'll be in January next year. So I missed the first ever show. That was in 2003, but I joined in January just after that. So, and I really have worked in pretty much every area of the business going through there as well, which gives you kind of good insights. I also took a little bit of a detour for a while and did a lot of study around UX, UI design, that kind of thing. And it became quite apparent when I was doing that kind of studies and those research techniques that, look, we can actually apply all of this to live events. You know, it isn't just for the digital world. And that's what really took me down the path of event design and interaction design in that kind of live events context. And then while we had that strange hinterland where we weren't doing any events for a couple of years recently, that really gave us time to really plan. We did some stuff in the digital world and learned a few lessons there, and we're able to sort of apply that kind of thing. So especially when it comes to new technologies, we're very, very open to that, especially anything that allows us to gain extra insights and measurements from a live environment. I'm a bit of a measurement geek. And so that's really how how I got to meet Panos through researching that kind of thing. And so experience design, interaction design, which incorporates measurement and things like that. That's pretty much my main focus at IMEX now.
And Panos, a little bit about yourself and how you got started, and tell us a little bit about what Zenus does for event organizers and agencies and things like that around the globe.
I'll be happy to. So my name is Panos, co-founder and CEO of Zenus, born and raised in Greece, came to the US in 2011. I got my PhD in computer science, and I was working in AI and facial analysis since then. And after graduating, we put together a team and we launched a startup in the events industry. Initially, we were doing something different. And after a while, we realized that there seems to be the biggest opportunity seems to be on the analytics, understanding the behavior of people at events, and then being able to improve their experience. And in a nutshell, this is what we do on the biggest scale. Oli alluded to that. He said, during COVID, we learned a few things, and then we knew how to apply them in live events. It's very similar what we do. When you do any type of online marketing, email blast, ads, search, posts, whatever you do, you're able to measure everything: views, likes, clicks, comments, dwell times, all of these things. And that allows the marketers on online channels to be able to analyze everything. When it comes to offline marketing, that's a little bit harder to do. And that's the gap we're filling with our technology, being able to understand how people experience things.
So the bridge between what we can do in the digital realm, but now in the physical realm that we deliver events in, right?
And more, if I may add so, and Oli, you feel free to jump here, because on the online world, you get presence, you get dwell time. In the physical world, we can actually analyze facial expressions, and then you can get sentiment. You can get sentiment continuously. So you can take a session, and you can see how it changes the audience reactions minute by minute. So you can actually have a little bit more information, in a sense, from the physical experience. And part of the reason we know why live events. Please. Oh, do you want to jump in, Oli?
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's like that old adage that if it's measured, it's managed. So it's impossible to be strategic about improving anything unless you actually have that measurement. The inverse is true. If you can't measure it, you can't effectively manage it. So when we were wanting to be more strategic about event design, experience design, we had to find a way to get beyond just the numbers of of heat mapping data and things, and get a bit deeper into that experience. But in a way that wasn't too heavy on our resources. We still do observations in person. It's very, very important to do that as designers. But using this kind of technology allows us to be a lot more broader and a lot more present, than we would be if we just just threw bodies at it. Also, it removes just personal prejudices. If you're tired, you've been at the show 3 days, you might not want to be there. AIs don't get tired. You're going to get those consistent results throughout things as well. So it's very, very useful to support other insights that you might have got in person on that side of things as well. It's the sort of thing, yes, you can do a lot of in the digital world, but I'm more excited about this now because people are actually present in the live environment. And for me, it's the kind of metrics that we can get from the live environment now supersede anything that we can get from the digital world.
I think that for me is what most, or if all of the technology that's coming in or already in the space for the event space is, it's elevating us to the same, if not in, like you said, Panos, some areas that online and digital can't touch upon. And I think adding more value and more power to people who invest in live events as a way to connect with their industry and their customers and their prospects and things like that in a much more tangible way to help safeguard and protect that budget line and investment in meeting face to face. I think there's never been a world, certainly in my lifetime, where we often feel so distant, and events provide so much value of coming together. But part of that as event organizers is we have to find ways to continually improve the experience and provide more value back, not just to the exhibitors and sponsors, but as you said, Oli, the actual attendee as well, right? Oli, if I could just ask you and maybe dig into the reason you partnered with Zenus on IMEX. What specifically was it that you were looking to gain more insight on, or were there other challenges or objectives around working with Zenus?
Yeah, I mean, we catch up regularly, and the conversations much like this one. We always run out of time a little bit too quickly. Really, it's it's amazing where the ideas come from. But I do remember specifically how it started. There's several areas of IMEX events that we put a lot of time and resources into. Things like a lounge that we create for our hosted buyers, the catering areas, our education spaces. They're very, very important aspects of the show. Yet they're areas that we know the least about because the success criteria there is not something that we can get from scan data. But we wanted to be strategic about our design. We want to keep improving these spaces, but how can we do that unless we find some way of measuring that? And I remember talking to a number of people about how you can possibly become strategic about these qualitative elements in design. And I think it was a conversation with Dax Calder from the Smile Agency, and we talked about facial analysis. And then it was just one of those moments when the planets aligned, and then Panos met with a colleague of mine, Jonathan Bradshaw from the Mutology group, and then the conversation started there. So it started really as a way to be more strategic about some of the key elements in our show, so we could benchmark and then build and test the experience. Well, we had these hypotheses. We think they're working. We knew exactly what they were supposed to be doing, but we wanted to make sure they were doing what we were supposed to be doing. And so it was really exciting to be able to, for the first time, experiment with technology that gave us those insights that weren't just anecdotal of us, looking at post-event surveys. So you're measuring the kind of remembrances rather than the actual experience. It's very different. Or our own observations where, for the best will in the world, we're pulled in several different directions when we're on site, and we can't really just focus on that, and plus we don't have insights into people's mental states the same way as observing someone's face for any period of time. So it started out as a way to measure those qualitative aspects for areas that are core components, we believe, about enhancing the attendee experience. It wasn't actually sales focused or anything like that at that time.
That's really interesting. So using the technology to, I guess, back up with data, the thoughts and feelings you had about already how the event was going and how people were interacting and the sentiment around the event and things like that. And I really liked as well, I guess, and you've mentioned this a couple of times now, taking out any human bias out of those opinions and things like that, judging it by the data that was there that you got back from Panos and the team at Zenus.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to have more than one form of measurement, I think, and as many as you can. This is a wonderful tool, but there's other tools out there, and having them all working in tandem is the best thing you can do. There's no substitute from being there yourself and experiencing it alongside all of the other people. But you can't be there all the time. So you need that extra help to help, give you that broader, longer picture. Because you might be there for 10 minutes, you might think this is fantastic. As soon as you walk out the room, well, hell might break loose, and then you've got a very, warped idea of how things went. Obviously, the inverse is true as well. You might just be really unlucky and just, go to a space where everything's going wrong, and then that's not a real depiction of how things went over 3 days. But the things have to go together. Equally, things like diary studies, geolocation data, all of that can join in together, to give you that overall picture and the full insights about what exactly is happening. So, for example, I might be able to tell from some kind of heat mapping data that the catering area is really busy on lunchtime on a Tuesday. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, I don't know, because we need to measure sentiment as well. Are people enjoying being there? So it's all these things together give you a really good picture of how well you're doing and how much people are enjoying the experience. And they should not be considered in isolation, but as a part of an overall holistic, measuring package. Really.
Yeah, and Panos, do you find that many other customers that are coming or discovering what Zenus can do are coming at from very much the same angle as Oli and the team at IMEX, or are there other reasons as well that event professionals are coming or event organizers are coming to Zenus to have their technology deployed on their events?
It really depends on the type of the organizer and the client and the partner. It really depends. But usually the core is having the ability to measure and quantify things. I think the one thing that Oli and the team have done really, really well is they're very open to experimenting and trying things out. So one of the things we did on the first show, like Oli mentioned, the hosted buyers lounge, which was very, very nice. We recommend it. Can you put a baseline where you can cover a few general areas to establish a baseline and compare? Because just saying the positive sentiment in area X was 50%, 60%, 90% tells you nothing unless you have a baseline. And we do have our own benchmarks from all of the events we have ever done. But you also want for the event at hand to be able to compare within this event, within this group, how things change. So these are some of the things we have enjoyed very much working with Oli and the team, that they're very open and they're thinking things very constructively and very deliberate in everything they do. And you can see this in the way we interact together, but also throughout the event.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I want to come on a little bit to, I guess, some headlines and maybe the way that some other people feel about, and I think it's also probably maybe an opportunity to explain the difference between facial recognition and facial analysis. The technology in general can be sometimes quite controversial in topic. I think we're having some conversations, or there have been some larger conversations, when we see companies like Amazon and others using this technology around privacy and the ethics, and back to your point again, Ali, the bias that may be around it or programmed into it, shall we say. I know this is a topic that's now massively coming up when it comes to just AI in general and the use of AI, and will we get to a point where people have some pushback in the how is my information being used, even if it's anonymized, how are you processing it, holding it, using it, that kind of stuff. How do you, and you can probably answer this both from different angles, Oli, you as the event organizer, and Panos, you as the technology provider, but how do you go about addressing these concerns? I'm going to come with you, Panos, first from a technical prospect, because I guess you have to justify this first and foremost to companies and individuals like Oli before they have to then justify it to attendees, because if they don't use it, they don't have to justify it. But like, what the conversations you're having around the ethics and privacy of facial analysis on events, and maybe just explain the difference to start off with between recognition and analysis as well.
So the first thing I want to comment on this is that there's often the dilemma: who's responsible for privacy? Who's responsible for the way technology is being used? And our opinion has been that the companies and the people developing the technology are, to a great extent, responsible for embedding tools and having ways to mitigate most of the challenges that come with privacy. That's the first part. The way we do it, in our case, our faces say a lot about who we are, but also the way we feel, where we are, and so forth. It's not just who in terms of identity, but someone was there, they stayed a long time. Was it a male person, female, young, old, facial expressions, and so forth? So just detecting a face without identifying it gives you a lot of information. And that's what we do. Face recognition is I'm using my face to say this is Panos. Facial analysis is I'm using my face to say somebody was there. They stayed for 5 minutes. Their facial expressions had positive reactions. And then you aggregate this on a group level. And this is how you get the insights, because very, very important. It is almost impossible to infer the way a person feels from the face alone if you have a single person. But if you have a group of people in location A versus a group of people in location B, that becomes a little bit easier to understand which experience was better. So it is not identification. You're not matching faces against a database. You don't keep any faces against a database. It is just group level anonymous statistics. That's the first part. The second part is the way it is being deployed. The traditional approach has been you're sending all the video from the premises to the cloud. This has lots of logistical and security and privacy implications. You need a lot of bandwidth. It's very expensive. And you transmit video and you store it at a different location. So we have created some sensors that people listening, virtually, it's a very small box like an Apple TV. That's how you can picture it, but it's like a supercomputer. And what this does is it can analyze the physical environment without storing or transmitting video. Just for reference, when you take a picture with your phone, it's about 9 to 10 megabytes. Our sensors, over the course of an hour, they will collect on aggregate 1 megabyte of data, 10 times smaller than the picture. So that's because it's only keeping the group level statistics. It never stores the video, it never transmits video, it never identifies anyone. It's impossible to go back and say this person was doing that. In fact, you can not even track people from camera to camera. That's how strongly we have gone and seriously we have gone about this topic. And the moment this is explained to people, it creates a lot of ease. But explaining it to people is important, and education is important.
And I guess that's really interesting that you can't track from one camera to another. And Oli, back to your point, why it's important to use other technologies as layers to other identification processes, heat maps, things like that, so you get that full picture. Oli, I guess the way that Panos and Zenus approach the non-storage of data, or what data they do store is not transmitted and things like that, obviously I'm assuming that made it a more straightforward and easier decision for you to use that technology on the show. But just from the organizer's perspective, I guess if you could just enlighten us to what, if anything, you have done around attendee communications around this technology being deployed on the show. And also, had there been any conversations or concerns internally that were addressed as ultimately non-concerns because of the way that the technology is deployed, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree with, yeah, it does. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I absolutely totally agree with what Panos said a bit before, in that once we understood the technology, that and it didn't feel like there was any grey area for us at all. It was obviously perfectly ethical and fine. It's very, very important to be transparent. I think that's the key thing. Not just about the way that the technology works, but why you're using it in the first place. Because I think it's the unknown that makes people nervous. It's always is the same thing. And for us, we're quite open about why we're using it. We're using it not for any kind of marketing reason or anything like that. We want to make a better show for people, really, by by finding the things we're not doing very well and making them better, or doing more of what we're doing right. And it's not anything else above what we haven't been doing since the first show in 20 years ago, when we were looking around, stick our head in the door, how is it going? Seems to be going okay. It's just that we're using technology, we can get a lot better at that. And similarly, when you've got a better baseline or a more consistent technology, then you can start comparing your show this year with the show last year and the year before and things like that as well. And then it starts becoming more interesting and doing that. It's baked into our registration process now, where we make people aware that we're using this technology at the places where the sessions are as well. There's mention of it as well. So transparency is very, very important to us, and it doesn't feel like at any point that we're at all worried. But it is an important point to raise, and anytime there's new technology, especially with things like AI at the moment, it's very important that this debate happens, just so that we can set minds at rest. Panos?
So IMEX has gone to the level that in the last show in Frankfurt, they even had a whole session talking about the rebranding of IMEX, and they added as part of that of how they have used the technology to measure the impact of it. So they have been a great partner, and they are a great partner, continue to be a great partner in how they are communicating this to the organizers. Because, on one hand, you can say, okay, I had a disclaimer so everybody knows. But it's a different thing having a session and a conversation and being able to invite everyone to listen in why you're using the technology and how you're using it. And that's a very important piece.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, seeing behind the curtain is something that we want to make sure everybody can do, because it is, like I say, that fear of the unknown. Why do they want this information? What have they got? I mean, if you're very open and actually we want to celebrate it because we consider it best practice. So we're happy to, as Panos said, we invite people like himself to discuss that aspect along with in context of the actual use case, and then it makes sense, and then people think, oh, actually, it's actually really cool, and it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to give a massive testament to, I think, the way that IMEX designs their event experience overall, with the show floor, obviously where the meetings and education take place, and then the whole other side to the event, which is much more about how people are interacting with the event, that IMEX's sustainability journey and how they're doing what they can there, the use of technology. And I think people really appreciate that transparency and that peek behind the scenes, because we've all been backstage somewhere, haven't we? And we kind of looked at how the events and pieced together and taken away inspiration. And I don't think our industry events should be any different. In some cases, we're doing things very similar. In other cases, we're doing things very differently. So yeah, I have to give a hats off to IMEX in terms of their approach to that, because that's always been one of the elements of the event I've most enjoyed as well.
And if I may jump in, Adam, on this one, based on our scores and our global benchmarks, IMEX, even though a big focus is education, it's scoring really, really well across the board. It's usually scoring in the top 75th, even 90th percentile. So the work the team is doing, you can actually see it in our data too. So I just wanted to shout out.
Oli, I think one of the interesting parts to focus on over the next couple of minutes would maybe just some examples from the past event, or maybe going into IMEX America this year or Frankfurt next year. What have you done, or where has the data influenced maybe, the event planning, the decision-making process for next year? Has it changed elements of what you've designed, or has it just been proof that you've got it nailed and you're doing a really, really good job?
Oh no, we never stop learning. That's for sure. One area that we're particularly focusing on for America this year, that has been guided by the data of the previous deployments, is to use it with in tandem with our sponsors. We've long suspected that the more active the sponsorship, so we're not just talking just a static banner here, but something that people can engage with, that would be embracing the ethos of live events a lot more, and hence would have more value to the attendee. Since we've been measuring that a little bit using facial analysis, we're able to say actually it does, against the baseline and against other things, you can see an obvious uptick with that. So we're able to then play back this information to the sponsor, which gives them more confidence and gives us confidence that we're giving good advice as well. That leads to then iterating those those activations, making them even more interesting, even more engaging, and then overall you end up with a better show and a better attendee experience as a result. So we want that to continue a lot more, and it's become almost a standard feature now. Where positive engagement is one of the success criteria, then we tend to use that as well. So certainly we'll be featuring this at IMEX America, and I'm very happy to to talk about the use of it and the results with anybody really. But particularly the more people that use it as well, the more we're able to give more focused insights and more comparisons. So it has a cumulative effect really, rather than just one thing used in isolation. In context of around the show and previous years as well, we can say, oh well, this worked better than this one, and I'm hoping in the future maybe that we can go even deeper into that, and people that are responsible for brands and responsible for marketing can start doing things, the sort of thing that you would do in the digital world, like A/B testing. We've got this brand version here and we've got this other version of our branding, which do people prefer, or what types of people prefer one over the other. It's been tricky to do that in the live real world until now really, and now we're starting to get technologies like Zenus that can help make those decisions as well. So it's becoming a lot more exciting space for experimentation for people, and certainly we're able to add insights to people that want to do more active sponsorships. They can just get more value from that, and hopefully as a result the attendees will get more of a return on their experience for actually going there and engaging with something that's been tuned to give them that better experience anyway.
I think that's a fantastic example, because to me, if we look towards, let's say, the brand experience activations that we see, the types of things that Nike do or the NFL do, or those kind of things, it's all based on getting people invigorated and engaged and part of the experiences, or walking away from it with memories of what that brand brought to that activation, as where they invested their money in giving people a good time. And when I think about the B2B world, it's often very much more, let's stick to what we know or what we've done in the past, or the shall we say, quote unquote, safe activations. Maybe it is a logo somewhere or a digital advert somewhere else or something like that. So to be having those data-led conversations to back up those, maybe more those things that are more outside of their comfort zone, but are actually really highly valued and really memorable by the attendees, and a much better use of budget to give more experience to the show, rather than it just be a passive engagement or something like that. I think that's something a lot of people could learn from, is having those data-led conversations to back that up. Panos,
And if I jump in here, so we're seeing it a lot from lots of different sides. It was a great thing versus I have X, Y, Z metrics to show why it was a great activation. That's the first part. Like, we see it on the brand side, where you have the brand manager saying, I'm going back to the office and I'm talking to my VP of marketing, my CMO, and they're telling me, why did we spend X amount? And the conversation is getting a little bit uncomfortable, where I have to try to justify things that intuitively I know they work, but saying it is one thing, showing it is another thing. So that's the first part. From the organizer perspective, it can be similar. It's one thing having your sales team, your account team, going to your sponsors and say, hey, it was a great show, what do you think? And it's a different thing going with data. But what we're seeing to a great extent is more and more organizers are starting planning on incorporating the metrics and analytics as part of the sponsor package. So in the past, you would say you're the platinum sponsor, you get space, a banner, a talk. Now you pay marginally, like 1 or 2% more, but you also get all the analytics that come with that. So it becomes part of the package embedded. So it's not an add-on, it's like part of the package because this is good for everyone. And what we see that IMEX has done really well this year. So we have done, in addition to the show using the service, we have lots of individual brands using the service. And we discussed with Oli, and he was like, that's what I was thinking. So we were entirely on the same page. What about getting a pool of data that everybody who agrees to share data with everybody else will do that? And right now we'll have so much coverage of this upcoming show. So I'm very, very excited to see what we're going to get out of it, because everybody that we told them that they work with us, hey, would you like to get us part of this group and pull all the data together? Everybody said yes. Everybody said yes because everyone wants to be able to compare. So it's going to be a very good deployment. Very exciting.
Yeah, I think as an events industry, whether it's trade shows, conferences, corporate events, whatever, we are under so much pressure to prove the value of what we do, even though when people come into the room, they physically feel the value of what we do and the platforms that we provide. But often the people making those budgetary or financial decisions aren't necessarily the ones that either are coming to the event themselves. Maybe they're the VPs or the C-suite or something like that. They're just that sales activations or marketing activations for the team. They can't be in all places at all one time. And that even goes sometimes for the person that's actually spending the marketing budget. They themselves might not be a part of the event delivery team or person on site. And without that tangible information, that reporting, that data, that stuff, all they have at the moment is a feedback loop from the people that were on site of like, how did it go? Or how many MQLs did we come away from that show with? Like, what was the lead number? The lead number of some, although it will still stay important, often becomes insignificant if they say, we had this many people in the room. We know from IMEX's profile, this is what those people look like. And look at the sentiment around our brand in terms of how that was perceived because we showed them a really good time or we left them with a lasting memory about our company or something like that. It's a totally different pitch.
Yeah, and it's not just, it's not just us wanting to justify people spending money on things we've created, because arguably it'd even more valuable if we showed that something wasn't working as expected and they needed to change it, so we're not trying to do that and just sort of like just give positive numbers all the time, because that's got no value to anybody. It might look good, but we won't get away with it for very long. What I'd like is for people to be able to see it as just a genuinely blind data source that they can look at and think, yes, we made a right decision there, or this is something we need to do a bit better on next time.
Yeah, it reminds me very much. Sorry, Panos, go ahead.
I was going to say that usually our best clients are the ones that they come to us and they say, tell us what we did wrong. Don't sugarcoat it. Just tell us what we did wrong. And most of our case studies is from these kind of clients, because they're getting the biggest returns. Like we have people having massive ROI by changing things and improvements. You have to have a strong stomach to say, you know what, maybe what I have done is not as good, or I have space for improvement. However you want to frame it. Very, very important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Oli, your point there reminds me of two companies at a show that from an organizer that I know, one of them being Google in particular, that wanted to move to another space just because their competitor was there, and having a lot of conversation on site about, we need to be there next year. We need to be in that space next year. They're getting more footfall traffic than us. They're getting better engagement. And actually they were using some technology that upheld their argument that you're actually wrong. You're in a much better place from a football perspective. But sometimes those opinions are hard to challenge without something to support your argument as well. I think,
and you know what? One last point, because we talked about the importance of measuring sentiment in addition to just attendance. We are starting to get data that they show that people often assume the first day is the best. But if you look at numbers, the second and third day sometimes have more quality, because you have higher dwell times, have higher positive sentiment. And we're starting to do some more reports and analysis where we see, it's still early because we need more data, but so far we see that the second and third day, sometimes these leads, they convert at a high rate and a higher contract value. If you look at 6 or 9 months down the line, which is very interesting. And this often happens because they have a better interaction. Yeah. And that's very hard to judge just from the number of leads alone.
I mean, we were talking, Panos, last time we had a call about how to almost flip the technology so we can measure a drop in engagement, because there's some show features that we have that are specifically designed so that people can get away from the hustle and bustle and the overwhelming, busyness of the show floor, just to recharge and switch off for a little bit. So, but we want to know that we've designed those correctly to achieve those objectives as well. So how do we measure that? So we were talking about maybe having something more like a binary measurement of sort of on or off, right, above or below a certain threshold, where we can just see the lack of engagement, where the lack of engagement is the success criteria. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's useful in that sense as well.
I think that's a really important point, because often if we don't create those quiet spaces or those more relaxing environments and things like that, and unfortunately Excel's not got a lovely park where people can go to in the sun and relax, and maybe that's a missed opportunity for them, as well as other venues around the world. But they're important because ultimately the only other option really for attendees is to leave the event entirely, find that safe space somewhere else, possibly their hotel and things. That then has a detrimental effect ultimately on the attendance of the show and the ROI that people can get, because those people are no longer there, right? They're seeking sanctuary somewhere else. So why not create those spaces on the show floor? And I think that's something that the exhibition market, trade show market, is coming round to the idea of, actually, this is not just cannibalizing show floor space or revenue from somewhere else. This is creating a better experience for our audience and supporting them, especially if there's kind of other accessibility and other welfare kind of considerations for attendees as well.
Absolutely. We're working closely with Google XI as a partner this time around, and creating a space specifically, to accommodate people with neurodivergent needs. And again, we can measure on whether that is successful in lots of different ways. We can see how many people use it. We can see if there's a change in facial expression when they're doing that, and then the old traditional way of just speaking to people around there as well, and just asking them, did you use the space? How did you find it? It's important to include spaces like that. Absolutely.
A quick question for you, Oli, on the post-show survey. Do you think the technology that you're implementing with Zenus will help alleviate some of those questions, make some of those questioning redundant, or do you see? I'm sure you're not going to remove that, because you seem to be such a fan of layers of information and access and stuff. But do you think the things that you might ask in a post-show survey, post-event, that actually are much better collected through a technology like Zenus, rather than trying to ask people to reflect on the event maybe 2 or 3 days after they've been and things like that?
The post-event survey is still really important, and I don't know. We still will have a big spread of questions to cover all aspects, but as we get more and more ways of measuring and monitor things as they're actually happening, then the post-event survey becomes more like a kind of canary in a coal mine, in a way, in that it'll point out something that's obviously a spike, something that's perhaps not right, or that we need to look deeper into, and then we can go back to the ethnographic data that we measured at the show itself, to say, does this tell us anything more about what exactly happened here? Why was this really good this year, or why was this really bad this year? And then we can go back to the source wherever we can, and then query it a little bit more, create hypotheses, and then maybe even do a follow-up with the people that responded in that survey once we got a bit more intelligence about it and said, we think it might be because of this. Is that true? And then we can have a bit more meaningful discussion about it. So yeah, absolutely, the post-event survey is still really important, and maybe depending on what data we gather, it could change the emphasis on some of the questions. But I think we'll still want to do a good spread and cover all major areas as well, because you're measuring something different. You're measuring people's remembrance of it.
Very true.
That's again quite different from doing something in the moment. So it's two completely different metrics that you've got going on there. You'd want them both to be positive ultimately. but they both are related.
That's what I usually say, Oli, that you want everything to point in the same direction. This is when you know you have something. When you see too much conflict between metrics, that's where there's usually space for improvement. For example, if you see very high dwell times, very high traffic numbers, but very low sentiment, well, that's usually it's a bottleneck. Usually it points to a potential problem. But when you have good traffic, good dwell times, good sentiment, that's when you know you have nailed the experience. And people often assume the more traffic, the better. But you mentioned about the neurodivergent people. 20% of the population is classified one form of neurodivergent, approximately. So too much traffic, too much noise, too much buzz is not always the best thing for everyone. And that's something you can start finding the optimal spot.
Absolutely.
As the use of facial recognition technology and analysis technology, should I say, as well, evolves, and this is going to be a question for you both in silo, because I know you're looking at it potentially from slightly different angles and things like, where do you see its future role in 2 to 3, maybe 4 years down the line within the events industry? And I guess as a secondary and follow-up questions, that are there any innovative ways that, Oli, you plan to use this technology, or that you hope that Panos develops for you to be able to use? And Panos, I don't know whether you can give us a peek behind the engine, but maybe there's just a comments or a few ideas there from you on areas that Zenus are currently looking to help support events. Oli, I'll come to you first with that question, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely fine. I think I may have alluded to it earlier on, how I'd hope that people will embrace this technology and use it for experimentation more, to try things out at events, and then allow themselves to benchmark results so that then they can iterate on the experiences. Whereas sometimes you try something, I think it went okay, shall we do it again next year? Oh no, we'd better do something different. We'll do it totally different next year. And then there's a lot of pressure on exhibitors and people who are planning live events to continually refresh and do something new. But if you've got a foundation, a way of measuring things to be able to build things on year upon year, then you've got a way, in a structured way, to improve activations and experiences. And that's as true for organizers as it is down for singular exhibitors on designing their stands, or sponsors thinking of how can we engage people as well. I mentioned again how you could then actually test two different things at the same event as well, in a kind of A/B kind of way. Again, organizers could use that in terms of, are we positioning things correctly? Is color making a difference? Something as simple as a different colored carpet or something like that. You can try all of these things out, and then the more you use it over time and the more other people use it, then that's a better data pool. And so long as everybody's continues to be happy with sharing, then then there's a cumulative effect on that. And the result is basically the whole trade show gets a boost, really, the whole industry, and becomes a more lively and more engaging place to be.
You're in a good place, Oli, because I guess you can do Las Vegas and Frankfurt A/B testing, then, can't you? In a year's cycle, where some organisers don't necessarily get to run their event until a full 12 months. Is that the way that you're kind of approaching it? Yeah.
I mean, they are quite different. The people that attend are very different people. But there are commonalities. There's some show features that are pretty much designed to be exactly the same, give exactly the same responses and have the same function. So we want to make sure that there's at least some consistency of standards as well, and that we have things tuned just right to meet that particular group. But you're absolutely right. I mean, we're still only a small company in a way. We get 2 chances every year. That's not an awful lot, so 2 chances to iterate every year. So we take them every single chance we get. Absolutely.
And Panos, what do you see the future holding for Zenus and the way that the technology will support events going forward?
So it will be feature based. My response will be feature based. So something that Oli might not know, we have added benchmarking, easy benchmarking on the exhibitor and activation tab in addition to the sessions. So right now you have the ability to go and say, where does my activation rank within the event I have done as an organization, and on the global stage. So you're able to see where it ranks in different ways. That's the first part. The second part that's coming up next week, we have a unique estimate, an estimate of unique impressions to get closer to the number of unique people you're getting per day at different points. So this will be out next week. And then beyond there, when we go beyond that part, is some more enterprise support, integrations with Power BI and other analytics tools to be able to pull it in. And right now that the product is, by the way, it's new in the market in many ways, but it's more mature than people realize in terms of reliability, uptime, features, accuracy, and so forth. It is actually very, very mature. We have started expanding into other use cases, such as the ability for people to self-scan their badge from a distance with kiosks, and we have seen it being used at CIMA, at convening leaders, Educon, at different shows, Dell. Like, we have lots of different people using this service because it makes the experience better. I think Julius Solaris tried it at CIMA. He went on Instagram and he said, if somebody asks me to scan my badge manually again, I'm going to call security. That's how much he liked the experience of being able to do it entirely on their own. And then we will start looking into integrating voice analysis, because you can get a lot of feedback from keywords, from voice, adaptive content, integrating to DMX controllers, so you can change the lighting and the sound in real time based on emotional responses. So the way we're thinking about the overall roadmap is, on level 1, understanding the behavior of people. Number 2, influence the experience of people in real time by being able to integrate fully into the AV components. And the third part is the, predict what will happen, being able to have the benchmarks and have a database of tactics. If I do a panel for this audience, how does it react? If I do a keynote for this audience, what are the results? And being able to, analyze, influence, predict.
Yeah, I love that, because that goes back to a conversation we were having earlier in the week at a small AI conference around events that we hosted here in the UK. And it was very much talking about how, data and some of this AI technology and things like that could actually help a speaker prepare and tweak and tailor their presentation to resonate better with an audience based on the ability to see kind of ahead of the event, maybe who was going to be in the room, and kind of look at some social listening stuff and kind of bring that back through AI to go, hey, this audience might resonate better with this area of your presentation, so focus more on that. And to your point about using some of that to change the environment that we're in, very much reminds me of kind of the evolution of the 4D cinema, right? Introducing new things so it's more sensory based, because, with all the best will in the world, especially if they're there for majority for content, watching session after session and trying to, keep awake and engaged and switched on is very, very difficult when there's nothing outside kind of actively changing or anything like that. But I can actually see how some of that data being fed in to say, hey, let's change this to maybe just change the background music to something a little bit more tranquil. People are a little bit tense and maybe we want to relax them a little bit. Or maybe we come back from lunch and we want to energize them and things like that and get them back to it. I think that's a really exciting part of individuals like Oli and the teams at IMEX being able to really tweak and tailor that experience live through the event to make it more emotional and rememberable and visceral and things like that. So I think, that's perfect for what we do as event organizers. We're trying to create memorable experiences and things like that. Thank you very much both for coming on and giving me your time. Oli, for your time in explaining how IMEX approach it and some of the benefits that you've seen. Panos, for creating great technology that's allowing us as event organizers to do these great things and have this insight and stuff like that. For anybody that wants to go out and look and learn more about the technology that Zenus does, Zenus AI is the website, I believe, Panos, isn't it, that people can go to. IMEX America and IMEXFrankfurt.com, I believe, are the websites. And if you've not been to IMEX and you're in the events industry, where have you been for the last however many years you've been in it? Because everybody should go. I certainly am going to be there in America in later this year, looking at all the things that you're doing on site, and it is one of my favorite events, other than my own events. Obviously, I'm biased though. That's just, I have to get that in there. Thank you. For anybody who enjoyed listening to this podcast and made it to the end, please do give it a share and a like. Reach out to Oli and Panos, tell them how it benefited you or inspired you as well. Thank you very much once again, and we'll see you in the next episode.